Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today we are going to be looking at ILNP's second winter release of the season called Opening Night. This lineup features 5 bold jewel-toned jelly iridescent flaky polishes with 1 iridescent flaky topper, and I definitely have some thoughts on this release, so I will save those more for the end of the video after comparisons. For now, let's just get into the swatches. The first polish we have is Until Midnight, and this one is described as a deep black jelly with iridescent flakes. The formula on this one was pretty pigmented, not the most even coverage, which again I would attribute to the brush. If it was a rounded paddle, I think it would look a little bit more even, but it definitely wasn't bad by any means, and because it's a black jelly, I only needed 2 coats to get this fully opaque for me. And even though these are described as iridescent flakies, I feel like they are so different and unique compared to a lot of other iridescent flakies that we see, where they're pretty reminiscent of some of the overcast shades, if you're familiar with those. These are a little bit more jagged and irregular, a little bit more sparse, and not super color shifty. I feel like they almost have a silver look to them. Up next we have Curtain Call, and this one is described as a lush magenta jelly with iridescent flakies. So I'm pretty sure the iridescent flakes in the collection are all the same, but they do look a little bit different, obviously because of the colored bases that they're in. So this one has a little bit more pops of pink or red, but you do get more of that like silvery blue kind of flash in some flakies. The base on this one was incredibly pigmented as well, very juicy and squishy, also very even coverage, even on the first coat alone. I ended up stopping at 2 coats, but I could still see some nail line, but I don't know, it just didn't feel like enough to do a 3rd coat for me personally. And now getting into the blues, the first one we have is Late Night, and this one is the Midnight Navy Jelly with iridescent flakies. I would say calling this a navy is definitely very accurate. It's the darkest, inkiest kind of blue of the 3. I found the formula and application of this one reminded me the most of Until Midnight, where it definitely is very pigmented for a jelly. It's not super sheer or translucent, but I just didn't have the most even coverage with it, but it did even out really nicely on just the 2nd coat, especially with how dark it is. I feel like it also lends itself really well to just creating this like pond effect with the flakies, where some of them look really hidden under that first coat, but then others are a little bit closer to the top and really catch the light. The next blue we have is Take a Bow, and this one is actually described as a deep teal jelly with the same iridescent flakes, and it definitely is teal where it leans the most green out of the 3. It unfortunately isn't 100% color accurate here just from filming on my iPhone, so imagine this with a little bit more green in it, but it is a beautiful teal either way. And I found the formula on this one more similar to Curtain Call, where it was very even on the first coat and very juicy and pigmented and squishy. And I was expecting this to be even more opaque than Curtain Call was, just because this is a little bit of a deeper color. But I feel like I still saw some nail line, so I did end up doing a 3rd coat. I just didn't film the application for it. But doing the 3rd coat will definitely give you even more full coverage, where it basically looks fully opaque, similar to the black or the navy blue. And the last jelly flaky we have is Headliner, and this one is the rich indigo of the collection. So it leaned more purple, especially on the first coat. I feel like once I did the 2nd coat, it did deepen up a little bit more and looked a little bit more blue. But this one still had a really great formula, just like the others, where the first coat was very pigmented, not super sheer, but because it's a jelly, it still is very squishy, and again, it just layers all of those flakies in the base. And because this was another really dark shade, I found that this one was pretty opaque on 2 coats alone. I guess I will say that I noticed I did a little bit of a thicker 2nd coat, so maybe if you do thinner coats, you might need a 3rd, but I guess that's going to be true for any kind of jelly shade. It depends on your application. And rounding out the collection, we have Spotlight, which is a clear topper with teal to pink iridescent flakes. I feel like there is also this fine kind of shimmer going on, or maybe those are just super finely milled flakies, but there's just this little extra dusting aside from the bigger chunks that you see. So I'm wearing this in one coat over my bare nail just to show you how that looks. I feel like you can kind of see the flashes of pink and teal, but it really looks silvery in my opinion. But I thought it was still really pretty, especially for winter. It kind of has this icy crystal look. Of course, I did also want to show this over ILNP's white and black shades, canvas and ink, and like a lot of iridescent flakies, it's going to pop the most over darker bases. So I did also want to show this layered over the rest of the shades in the collection, because even though they are described as being flaky polishes, I personally feel like the flakies are a little bit on the sparse side, or maybe they just don't shine as much as other polishes do. So I personally really loved adding this flaky topper over them just because it adds more flakies. And again, the topper has this like little shimmer, so it just adds a little extra detail that I think is so dainty and pretty. And because the topper is on top of the jelly base, it adds more contrast with the colors of the flakes, where it's kind of that, again, sort of silvery look, in addition to the quote-unquote colored flakies in the jelly base. And here is the collection worn as a Skittle in natural lighting. I just did 2 coats just to kind of really test how the pigmented bases look, especially in direct sun. Remember that I said Curtain Call and Take a Bow were the ones that were the potential 3 coaters, and I think I would still go with that, even seeing them in direct sunlight. The base for Take a Bow looked not patchy, but it just looked like an extra coat would give it a little bit more oomph like the other colors, while Curtain Call could use an extra coat to cover up some more visible nail line. But again, I think that is only most noticeable in direct sunlight. In other lighting, they look really good on 2 coats, definitely passable. And of course, I am going to layer the flaky topper Spotlight over these, and I just really loved how this looked. I feel like the topper is definitely my favorite from the collection. It just really pops over these dark bases, especially in lower light, which is basically true for all iridescent flakies. Now, getting into comparisons, I don't have anything quite like these polishes, so I just have some quick bottle comparisons with Until Midnight next to Hex, which is a black jelly, but that obviously has these fiery kind of colored flakies. I think Hex was a little bit more sheer too, so the flakies in Until Midnight are a bit more similar to the ones in Thundercloud from the Overcast collection, which I mentioned before, but obviously that is a gray base, so not dupes. Then for Curtain Call, I knew I had to show this next to Bitten, which was from the Halloween collection last year. These basically have a very similar flaky, but the base in Bitten is a deeper, more blood red kind of shade, while Curtain Call is this deep magenta pink color, and obviously the flakies are also different colors, where Bitten has more of this golden flake as opposed to the teal pinky color in Curtain Call. So even though these are completely different finishes, just for like a color reference, I did want to show Curtain Call next to Honeymoon from the Vineyard collection. That one's a little bit deeper and more purpley. And here it is next to Merlot, which was the wine red from the Vineyard collection, which, like I just said, is more red and less pink. So Curtain Call is definitely not a dupe color-wise to these. And just in case anyone is curious, here it is next to Holo Taco's Misfire, which is from their Declassified 002. That one is more of a darker brick red kind of shade with a lot more glitter. If anything, color-wise, it's actually a little bit more similar to Holo Taco's Birthday Brat from the Birthstone collection. That one is a frosted metal, so it does have these flakes in it, but it's just a different look visually than the flaky jellies like Curtain Call. So I thought maybe if I did layer Spotlight over Curtain Call, it would be a little bit more similar, and it kind of has like a similar vibe where maybe these are cousins, but definitely not dupes. And lastly, for curtain call, I thought it was going to be a lot more similar in color to Petals from the Wildflowers collection this spring, but that one is a lot more vibrant and lighter with an orangey shift. So I actually think it's kind of closest to Morgan Taylor's Sleighing in Style, even though again, that one is also missing the flakies. The base color is definitely the most similar, and it does have this kind of micro shimmer that does shift to pink and blue. So kind of similar vibes, especially color-wise. It's just a different finish, so they're kind of like cousins and not dupes. Moving on to late night, I was immediately reminded of Holo Taco's Playing with Sapphire, even though that again has a different finish. Just color-wise, I thought these were going to be the most similar, but they are pretty different, where Holo Taco is like a true sapphire kind of deeper cobalt shade. So I thought maybe it would be more similar to something like Mooncat's When Hell Freezes Over, which is a flaky in a dark blue jelly base, but that one is a lot more packed with flakies, and as I'm sure you can tell in the bottle, it's just a bit too light. You can really see how deep of a navy late night actually is, along with how much more sparse it is, at least compared to other jelly flakies from other brands. Next, for Take a Bow, I knew this color was so familiar to me, and it reminded me of Invite Only, which was from the New Year's Eve collection 2 years ago, I want to say. That one is more of a typical micro shimmer kind of formula, so it looks different, but color-wise, they're pretty close. And I thought it was also pretty similar to the metallic flakies in Lord from the Halloween collection a few years ago. That one is in a black base though, so it definitely is the darkest out of the three. So no dupes, but definitely all in the same color family. And I actually wanted to bring back Mooncat's When Hell Freezes Over since it was too light for late night. I thought maybe it would be more similar to Take a Bow, but since that one is teal, I thought I could also show it next to Mooncat's Maelstrom, which is basically like the more teal version of When Hell Freezes Over. So seeing them all on the nail, they look a lot more similar, I think, on camera than they do in real life, but maybe that's just me being picky, where I can definitely tell the difference. But I would say that Take a Bow is like a very good in between of these two Mooncat shades. Moving on to headliner, this immediately reminded me of Last Call, which was also from a New Year's Eve collection a few years ago. It's just like the perfect indigo kind of micro shimmer. And I did also want to show this next to Grapevine, which was from the Vineyard collection. That one is also kind of like a blurple, but I think it leans more on the purple side. So it wasn't as close color-wise as Last Call was, but again, that one is a shimmer, so it's still not a dupe. So I also wanted to see this next to Set Sail, which I would definitely call like a true dark blue and not an indigo shade. And I feel like these are surprisingly similar in their color. So even though headliner is described as an indigo and you can see some of that purple undertone, it does lean a little bit more blue. And lastly, for Spotlight, I wanted to quickly show this next to Cirque's Silver Lining, which is basically like your basic silver metallic flaky, because again, I feel like Spotlight didn't have as much of this iridescent sparkle as a typical iridescent flaky like Mooncat's Foxfire, for example, which is like teal and pink and green. I feel like Spotlight is kind of a combination of these two formulas in a way, so I did find it pretty interesting and unique. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for ILNP's opening night collection. As always, I can't wait to hear what you think of this release, because unfortunately, it is just not for me. I know that might sound so crazy because I know a lot of people love this finish. It's basically the same as Bitten from last year's Halloween release. And I can't stress this enough. It's not because I think the polishes are like bad by any means. I just personally don't love this finish, which is so weird because I generally am a fan of like jelly bases with iridescent flakies in them. I mean, I know I have mentioned a few times already that this year has been kind of weird with flaky polishes where I'm almost like falling out of love with them. So it could be a little bit of that, but I just know personally this is one of those finishes from ILNP that I just don't really love or care for, kind of similar to their speckled finishes. That being said, I did really like the topper. I thought that was a unique and different enough iridescent flaky topper compared to other toppers on the market, so I did like that. But yeah, for the rest of the lineup, I feel like I would have just loved them so much more if they were like just the jelly bases. I don't know why I'm not a big fan of like the iridescent flakes that they use in them. And I know it is weird because the one shade that I shared in the comparisons, Thundercloud, which was from the Overcast collection, that basically has like the same kind of iridescent flaky, where it's not the typical ones that we see like in other brands, but for some reason I just really loved it in Thundercloud and like the rest of the Overcast collection. But then for these darker shades like the Opening Night collection or like in Bitten, I just didn't care for them. So it's just a weird thing. Again, I'm not trying to like rain on anybody's parade. I know so many people are excited for these, but I just personally am not, and it's just my personal preference and opinion. Again, there's nothing wrong with the polishes. I can't help but feel a little bit bad that this isn't like the typical, you know, very excited review that I normally have. It's hard to be excited when like, you know, you don't really care for polishes sometimes, but that's just the reality of it. I'm sure so many of you guys will understand how I feel because, you know, it's not the first time that I've expressed my own personal opinions about shades before. And I know you all know that it's nothing against like the brands themselves. Like obviously ILNP is still my favorite brand, but you know, they don't always make my favorite polishes, and that's fine because again, I know so many people are going to be so excited for these. So you'll have to let me know your thoughts down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.